Introduction. Over the past few months, my spirit has been overly vexed by something I have said and felt all my life. It's a thought that is prevalent within the whole worldwide population for the most part. A classification that I have been born into without choice, and something I have accepted, again, all my life. The thing is that for me personally, I know the truth. I have done years of study to understand the answer to the question that I've wondered all my life. I know the answer, but yet my programming still has me classify myself in this false way. It was just easier. This is what everyone knows, so it's what I should fall into. But over the past few months, the more I heard this classification, I would become frustrated and vexed. And from that frustration, I would start seeing it everywhere. People were starting to take pride in this classification and started recognizing how different we were than everyone else and why we all share these same qualities. I mean, I love the skits by certain people that say how we all react to things in the same way. I mean, it's hilarious to me. But again, I know the truth. And the thing is that knowing the truth irritates you when you hear the lie. But I dealt with it because everyone else obviously doesn't know. But now with this current election, it seems that this classification is highlighted more than ever. Kamala Harris is being attached to it, and Donald Trump is attacking her for using the classification.
I believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman.
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir.
And he's not wrong or lying. It's just that he should not be the one that is highlighting it, because his attention to it brings people further into the trap, which I actually think is the overall point, to be honest. Either way, two people that have nothing to do with my heritage are discussing it or using it. It's giving me flashbacks to 2008 when Obama, another man who has nothing to do with our heritage, was also using it to elevate himself. So at this point for me, it is becoming too much for me to bear and deal with. It is a result of decades of mind control that the world has been programmed to accept. And I do know and see that the ending result of all this is to just create a classification that merges all people into one. I will explain later. This is something I personally can no longer tolerate. When you understand the truth and understand why this classification has been made, you also understand that something must be said and done about it. A message must be given to all that will hear. And that message needs to be pretty much a major splash of water in their face, or maybe a strong slap across the face that forces everyone that hears it to wake up and leave the indoctrination. We must not stay in the social confines that this system has placed us in. We must wake up out of it. Now, I don't have some false expectation that I can stop this classification, because like I said myself, I still use it. It's hard for me to stop saying it or using it. But even though I might use it, the mental attitude that surrounds it, it's quite different for me. And it's this mental alertness that I desire to bring all that will listen to. And that message and understanding to all is that we are not black people. You may right now think this may be a silly topic or just something you might want to gloss over. But I assure you that this is only because of indoctrination and mind control. Let me explain that this classification about being black people is not the actual problem. The problem is why this classification exists in the first place. There is a strong mental program that has been used against everyone in the world to make you look at a certain segment of the world population in a very specific way that right now most people are not able to see why. There is a major agenda behind this, and it is highly important for all people to come to the truth and realization of this. But nobody more important than those that are being identified through this classification. I have been making videos for a long time about the truth of this world and the truth about religion. I do believe that very soon we are about to enter into an event that changes the world. I feel that right now, the people of this world are being locked into their segments that will determine where they are placed in regards to the agenda. I have been led to turn my focus to awaken the dry bones at what seems like the last effort for those who are being called before the world turns. You may not know what the dry bones means right now, but if you watch this series, it will be made more clear to you. This is a comprehensive video series made to breathe life into the dry bones. This is a series that I encourage all to watch with their family from the beginning and start the discussion. I will be breaking this down from the beginning and will break this series up by subject. By the end of this series, you will know clearly that the people that the world calls Black people are not that. It is an improper classification that has been used to fool and lie to the world in order to steal everyone's soul and lead people into an agenda that those who have been controlling this world for hundreds of years have been steering the masses to accept. I want you to know that we are not Black people. And if you finish this series, you will understand who it is we truly are. Let's begin. Okay, so this is the only time in this series that you will hear me say, let's begin. This video is a mere introduction to a very large topic, and we are right now beginning to break it down. If you have watched my videos before, you should know why I say that we are not Black people, because I have made many videos that explain this point. But in this last-ditch effort, I'm going to be thorough, and so I will be grabbing from many of my older videos while adding in a lot of new information and understandings. I want this to be treated as a docu-series that family and friends can go video by video through and begin to at least discuss what is being said. I'm trying to get the conversation started. Those of you that watch, you can help me with this. Now also, please know the release schedule of these are not according to my regular schedule, though there will always be new releases by Friday. But as I am able, I will be releasing the videos because all of this needs to be put out and done. So please check your notifications on YouTube to see if you get notifications, or just come back regularly to check the playlist. This is a very important subject and it needs to be addressed properly. If you feel I left you hanging at the end of a video, please know I should have another video coming out shortly after. So let's get to it. First off, what exactly is the problem with being called Black people? Let me see. First off, it's because I am not Black. Most people I know that are called Black people are not Black. Me, personally, I am a perfect shade of brown. And all the people that are in this classification that are not intermingled are not Black, but different shades of brown. Or more accurately, different shades of wheat. That is all people, by the way. From lighter tone to darker tone, different shades of wheat. My sons all have different skin tones, but both myself and their mother are a perfect brown complexion. We are not light-skinned, and what we are is not Black either. Now here's the thing. There are blacker, darker-skinned people, and they have beautiful skin, like this brother right here. But in truth, many people in that complexion, at least from the ones in America, I do not share heritage with. They are not my kin. So there is no reason to group me into a classification with them. Now, I have nothing against them, obviously. It's just that we are not kin. For instance, the real situation that got me going is this Kamala Harris. After she was put into the presidential race, all of a sudden, people from my ethnic group, my tribe of people, all of a sudden started classifying her as a person that is tied to our heritage, even though the facts say something completely different.
Now, if Vice President Harris becomes the nominee of her party, she'll be the first Black woman and person of South Asian descent to lead a ticket. CBS News Miami's Tanya Francois went into the community speaking to Black women about what it means.
It's the opportunity to make history as a Black woman voter, to vote another Black woman into the highest office in the United States of America.
But because she is not what we call a white person, it's easy to just classify her as Black. Well, I should say easily done for those who don't mind living in pure ignorance. But she is not Black. Or what I'm trying to say, she shares no heritage with a group of people labeled as black people in the United States. And it was because of her that they are now wiping out our heritage altogether and now placing everyone under a label of people of color. Everywhere now is a person of color.
What do you think having the first woman of color elected to national office means to black mothers and black nieces and black people everywhere?
Well, you know, Shep, there's a lot of focus on the word first, but you have to think of what the first means. First woman, first black person, first South Asian American person to be elected vice president of the United States.
Nothing consistent with the Republican Party's continued attack, except for the racism and incitement of violence against women of color in this body.
The four Congresswomen of color known as the Squad feel undermined by what they perceived as microaggression or subtle discrimination. While it's happening on the big stage where they can fight back with some support, many women of color in America face similar problems in workplaces where they could lose their jobs for speaking up.
All eyes have been on the presidential race, so you might have missed an important milestone that Congress just reached.
Next year's Congress will feature the most women of color ever. Some are historic firsts, and others are familiar faces on the Hill.
I'm Teresa Leche Fernandez.
My name is Marilyn Strickland.
My name is Nidia Velasquez.
And I am representing the 10th Congressional District of Washington State.
I represent the 7th Congressional District. I am the Congresswoman-elect in CD3 of New Mexico.
I was elected in November 2020.
I was first elected to Congress back in 1992. I was elected on November 3rd, 2020.
At least 51 women of color will serve in the 2021 Congress, more than ever before. The previous record of 48 is held by the current Congress.
That is an incredible achievement.
It is exciting, and it shows that more women of color, African American women, and women from all backgrounds are feeling comfortable running for office.
Since she came on the scene, everyone is now calling themselves this. Oh yeah, I'm a person of color. Which, if you can't see it yet, they're using this to erase this classification of black people altogether. But again, most people just can't see this. They are erasing us and who we are slowly but surely. You see, this is all able to be accomplished because we are being labeled by our skin color and not our actual heritage. Even with like President Obama, he was labeled as the first black president. But Obama also does not share our heritage. Now, the person that they call his wife does, but not Obama. These people are not our kin. But because we're so indoctrinated, we are very easily fooled and manipulated. And for me personally, my tolerance of this is at its peak. I can't take any more of it. You cannot classify people by the color of their skin. It's ignorance. So that leads me to the next point, because I know someone is probably waiting to call me a hypocrite. They probably commented in the comment section before they even got to this part. The hypocrisy people probably want to mention is, why is it wrong to say black people, but I can call other people white people? Well, listen, if you're asking me that, I mean, you're not wrong. That's a very fair point. But it also highlights the actual problem. Let me show you. Let's examine the classification of white people. White people being the only other main group in this world that are really classified by their skin. What I mean by that is that we don't call Asian people yellow people. They don't call themselves, yeah, I'm a yellow person. But people do call themselves white people. And in my ethnic group, we definitely classify them by their skin color. But here comes the main difference. Though they use the classification, they still know who they are. I have never met a person who identifies as a white person who doesn't know where their family descends from. I have heard countless stories about people's ancestors who came from somewhere in Europe with a few cents in their pocket and came to America, and later their family became wealthy. This is a very common story within this group that we call white people in America. Now, on the contrary, for the people in the black classification group, if someone wants to just try to classify us outside of our skin color, they just call us Africans. Africa, this vast, major continent of the world that is home to many different tribes of people, we simply are summed up as Africans. But there are no other people in the world that receive this type of general classification that they can't go any deeper with than a continent. For instance, we could just call the Americans who are labeled as white people, we could just generally call them Europeans. I mean, we could, but in their own family, they know they have history. They can tell you that their family descends from here or there. They may be Irish, Scottish, French, Italian, Dutch, or even Jewish. There is a big difference between all these different types of people. And if you're just to classify all of them just as Europeans and say they are the same thing, these people would be offended. I mean, imagine telling a Jewish person that they are the same as an Italian or Irish just because they all came from the same continent. Or let's look at other people, like this group of people. We don't call them yellow people, we call them Asians. But classifying Asians as all the same because they're all on what we call the continent of Asia, this is pure ignorance. The people that classify into the group known as Asians know where they descend from. They know their heritage. A Chinese person is very much different than an actual Indian. Koreans and Japanese take offense if you say they are the same thing. Can you understand how ignorant that is to just say that they are all the same because they all come from one continent? Okay, but for some reason, when classifying the group of people known as Black people, even in this modern age of information where these type of subjects, they shouldn't even be in the dark any longer. This is the age of information. If we are to be classified aside from our skin color and not be Black people, all we get is African. Now, people in the Caribbean, maybe you feel that you're not tied to that because you're identified by your island. But listen, that's not what you are. You are not Jamaican or Bahamian or Cuban. That's not who you are. That's the island you were dropped off to. Who are you before they took your family to that island? I guarantee there is no answer for this for the majority except knowing that you're African. You see, we are classified by a skin color or just a general classification of a continent, and we have been so indoctrinated, we have just grown to accept this, and to the other peoples of the world, it doesn't matter much to them at all. So they're comfortable with that classification because history has told us that the history of Africa does not matter, so it's okay to just say African. Because for the people that control our history, it is only Europe and Asia that matters in our history. Because if you ask an actual African, someone in Tanzania or Cameroon or Nigeria, many of them know their tribes that they descend from, and many of them know they don't share anything with us genetically or historically. In fact, the common rebuttal many people like to use to justify slavery is that it was our own people that sold us into slavery. But why do they say that? Because to the world, Africans mean African. There is no difference. They are all Black, and therefore they are all the same. But in no other continent of people is this so. Again, Japanese are different than Chinese. Italians are different than Greeks or Dutch or Spanish. But when it comes to Africa, we are all supposed to be the same thing. That's ignorance. Can you see the hypocrisy in this? Can you see how ignorant that actually is? There is an African section in Harlem near 116th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard. Ever since I was a kid, I would go there for certain things you could only get from them. You see, I never attached to them. I never personally felt that I shared anything with them culturally. And it was more than just the African culture because I lived in America. I mean, when I go to different parts of the Caribbean, even though they're different islands, I share many of the same qualities with them. Our humor, our rhythm, our tolerance or lack of tolerance to different things, our genetic features. But with other Africans, I didn't feel the same thing. When I was young, I thought it was because I was just colonized. But after study and research, I know it's because they are not my people. And again, that doesn't mean I'm against them. It just means we're not related. In relation to my heritage, they are just as much a part of my culture as a European would be. We all do not descend from the same people. They are not my kin. We do not share the same heritage. But because we have been mind controlled to look at our skin color, or then just a continent, we are not able to understand that we are all being played and why this is so. You have to understand that this is intentional. Go back in time to when slavery started and they were taking people from the land. What they want us to think is that they were just grabbing up people at random. But that's not the case. The tribes that sold our people into slavery knew exactly who it was that they were taking. And this is why, if I would take a classification right now, outside of who we truly are, I would gladly take being a Negro. I bet that might sound crazy to you, right? It shouldn't. It's not the same as the other N-word that they got us all to call ourselves. We were classified by this word Negro for a long time, until they assimilated us after their civil rights agenda. Then they replaced Negro with African American, and though they still use it, the classification of black people seemed to win in popularity, and that's why we're called black people today. But like I said, I would rather be called Negro, which, if we're being technical, it means the same thing, just using the original language of the people who first took my people as slaves in the first place. The main reason I at least prefer the word is because for anyone wanting to search more into who we are, this term can be used as a great starting point for understanding. Now, I don't want to move too fast, and I promise I will explain this further in depth when we get to it. But if you look at the old slave maps, they are very telling. Do you see this area right here? Yeah, it's called Negroland. I have a few different versions of this map from different years. I have them hanging up in my home, all for a constant reminder that they knew who they were taking when they were gathering my people as slaves. It was not random. They had a map of boundaries, and they were collecting people from Negroland. Now, if you know history, when did we become classified by our skin color? Okay, so you should be coming from part 1 of this series. These videos are a part of one docu-series and should be watched from the beginning in order if you're going to understand what is being presented. So please, if you have not watched part 1, please stop this video and start back from video 1. Okay, well, like I said in part 1, we are not black people. But this statement needs a lot more information in order for the point to be validated and to be true. So the first thing that needs to be done is deal with racism. Because if you're able to understand how this topic has been programmed into us, it can help you better understand what it is that I'm communicating overall. Now let's get a few things out there before we begin. This is in no way seeking to place one group of people over another people. This is not about one group or race of people being better than another. I do realize that the truth can often lead to different types of feelings, but this is not the purpose of this video. The goal of this video is for education. When we are properly educated on subjects, we allow ignorance to slowly go away. In the time that we're in, we are the most formally educated generation in the history of the world. But the vast majority of the world does not know much about race besides skin color or nationality. And in our most modern history, over the past 3 or 4 centuries, the world has been divided by race and dominion of nations. So this is just what we know today, and that's how the majority sees it. To the world, I'm an American by nationality of the country I was born and live in. But to many that see me, I am a black man from Africa. A white man is looked at as a Caucasian from Europe, a Chinese man is an Asian, and a Mexican is a Latino or Hispanic. So at the basis of race and nationality, the world is broken up by continents. People desire to label us and group us in by our skin color, continents, and regions. But is that fair? Is that accurate? The simple answer is no, it is not. But we need to discuss why. Believe it or not, racism is a fairly modern idea. Over the history of our world, people did not classify people by their race or their skin color. People were classified by their tribal names, such as Persians, Greeks, Jews, Saxons, Ethiopians, Egyptians, etc. The world was not divided by the term Negro or Caucasian. The world being divided by color was an idea that originated from white supremacists in Europe after the Renaissance period. Racism is a social construct that helps create white supremacy, and the more we attach ourselves to their way of thinking, the more we are controlled and influenced by white supremacy. For me, a while ago, I made a decision that I was no longer going to be influenced or tied to white supremacy. And because of this decision, my life has drastically changed for the better, as I made many different adjustments to my way of thinking. When you understand the history of this world, the world was drastically changed during and after the period of the Renaissance. The dividing of the world by skin color is just one of those changes. Let's talk about it. We'll start with this guy, Johann F. Blumenbach, a German anthropologist born 1752, died in the year 1840. He was the first person to divide humanity on the basis of skin color. We can attribute much of our racial divide today because of him. Now, don't misunderstand me. Racism, it already existed before this time. There was already a belief in scientific racism, which I will touch on shortly. You see, Blumenbach did not create racism. He simply placed a classification system that is still used today. An official classification of people did not exist before Blumenbach. His work is considered one of the most influential works in regard to race. He classified that there are 5 chief races of mankind. They are the Caucasian or white race. He was the first to use this classification for people of the European origin. He believed the people of the Caucasus Mountains were the most beautiful in the world. I should note that Johann was a Protestant Christian. He was born into a cultured, wealthy Protestant family, a Christian family. It should be understood that racism got its beginning through Christianity, Protestant Christianity. I know that's a hard thing to wrap your head around, and I know that there will be many different types of defenses to this, but you can't escape the facts. Racism was created under Protestant Christians, just the same way that slave masters that enslaved our ancestors were Protestant Christians.
That's scripture.
So let me address the elephant in the room. As I go through this, I will be using scriptures from the Bible. And if you're new to my channel, depending on your influence, you may try to tie me to the same Christianity. And that might be a good thing for you or a bad thing. Let me explain this now, though. I have nothing to do with this Protestant Christianity that was spread throughout the world, and I categorically reject the foundation that it represents. But, and this is a big but, this does not mean that I reject the Bible. These are 2 different things. Please do not tie me to organized religion, because as I will present through this series, the way we got here is through these organized religions. So if you hear me bring up the Bible or the scriptures, and you think I'm trying to make you a Christian, you are incorrect. And if you're concerned that I'm not trying to make you a Christian, I have made videos like this one that explains my issues in case you want to understand my views further or why I don't want you to be a Christian. That's just a label. I do not have a problem with the Bible. I very much believe in it. I very much lived through it. I have a problem with organized religion that has spread through the label of Christianity. That's the problem. Either way, what I ask is that you do not place me in any box that you may want to place me in. You see, if I was in a certain box, I wouldn't have to make this video, because there are plenty of people from the many different boxes and groups that have tried to speak about these things. You see, the reason I call this truth unedited is because most people give truths that they edit, because certain truths are hard to deal with. It's hard talking about race. You know, in the comment section, I'm going to deal with a lot of slack. I understand this. But I believe that when you withhold truth or you edit it because it makes things uncomfortable or controversial, this is when you are compromised. Edited truths are another form of a lie. And for me, I have no tolerance for it. I can't live with it. So understand, it could be an easy detail to just leave out the fact that racism was started by Protestant Christianity. In fact, it was started by a Protestant Christian in the nation where Protestant Christianity was started from with Martin Luther's Reformation. This was Germany. But it's important to understand that religion is baked up within all of this, which is why these truths are so hard to accept or reject. Let me keep going though. Like I said, Blumenbach started the classification of people by skin color. An official classification of people did not exist before Blumenbach. His work is considered one of the most influential works in regard to race. He classified that there are 5 chief races of mankind. Again, they are the Caucasian or white race. He was the first to use this classification for the people of European origin. Like I said, he believed the people of the Caucasus Mountains were the most beautiful in the world. This is where the term Caucasian comes from. Then he had the classification of Mongolians, or the yellow race, which included all of East Asia and some of Central Asia. Then we have the Malayan or brown race, which included Southeast Asia and Pacific Islanders. Then the American, which was the red race. This was the American Indians. And lastly, the Ethiopians, or the black race, which was the sub-Saharan Africans. This man was a white supremacist and considered the Caucasian to be the original race. So when we start talking about racial divide, this is where the conversation starts from, right here. He basically color-coded the people of the world. He was a racist. And this should not be hard to imagine that there were Christians that were racist. The slave owners themselves who owned slaves were Christians. The KKK themselves were Christians. So being that now that the world denounces all these things, when the modern world was being created, these ideas were actually embraced. It's cowardice and hypocrisy to ignore this. Now, when this color coding system by skin color started, we are talking about a time period in history that has mixed around a great deal of change. You see, America was just about to gain its independence and become its own nation. The Rothschild family was about to emerge on the scene with their wealth transfer from the powerful German family of the Hesses. Again, who, by the way, was another huge supporter of the Protestant Reformation a century earlier. Freemasonry came out in the open from the shadows just 60 years before this, and the world was being influenced by the Renaissance period, where they began centuries of religious indoctrination with the humanist movement, reimagining biblical figures, painting the figures of the Bible in their own images. Also to add with that, the letter J was created during the Renaissance, so the name of Jesus was now officially made possible. Remember, the sound of the letter J was never heard before the Renaissance period. What I am saying is that this period was a time of great foundational change. The way our world is today would not be so without this time period in history. I have made a series that covers these things more in depth if you want to understand these things further. Like, I've covered the Protestant Reformation in depth, as well as the Renaissance movement, how the Europeans made God in their own image. I've covered all these things. So if you want to study those things on your own, there are playlists for you. But understand, the world was changing at this time. So after all these things were coming together, all these changes were happening in the world, the most important being America was going to be its own nation governing itself within its Masonic principles. Racism was created as a mindset that would now divide the world, and the Protestant Christian Europeans who were in control of the world at the time made a doctrine that made them superior to all. They changed the way we thought about things. Let me give you an example. Do you know how people say someone is fair? Do you know before white supremacy, this actually just meant beauty? But after this racial movement, this meaning of fair was changed to mean white because they made their skin the definition of what beauty was in the world? So now when somebody says fair-skinned or something's fair, they're talking about white.
Our obsession with light skin has been around for centuries.
This is white supremacy. These are just mental mindsets that were created through racism. And listen, I get it. It may make you uncomfortable to hear about it, especially depending if you are a victim to it or you benefited from it. But these things are just the facts of our world that we can't get around. We can only understand it and learn from it as we ourselves grow. Let's keep going. After Blumenbach, there were more contributors to the mental mindset of race. We have a 19th century French aristocrat named Joseph Arthur de Gobineau. This man was known for his influence on legitimizing racism through scientific racism and developing the theory of an Aryan master race. He wrote a 1,400-page book named An Essay on the Inequality of the Human Races, which argues that there are differences between human races, that civilizations decline and fall when the races are mixed, and that the white race is superior. He used the scientific racism theory, which was a belief that evidence exists to support and justify racism. Simply, racial discrimination, racial inferiority, and racial superiority. His doctrine justified all these things. Scientific racism was common from the 1600s to the end of World War II after the fall of the Nazis. It was publicly denounced as racist, but obviously held as a belief in many other influencers still to this day. I mean, after World War II, we were still dealing with racism in America. Anyways, it was this J.A. Gobineau, that really helped legitimize racism as being valid. And there were many others like Houston Stewart Chamberlain, 1855 to 1927. This man wanted to advance the supremacy of the white Nordic race and its culture. The point is that due to the influence of people like these men and others is where we get the division of race today. It's not me. You want to blame me talking about it, but it's not me that made it up. It's these men. They added a psychological value to race that made people believe it was so. Basically, being that at the time, European civilizations were dominating much of the world through inhabiting foreign lands and possessing major breakthroughs in technology, to them, it meant that they were obviously superior and others were inferior. This was racism, and it led to a horrible racial philosophy, and eventually it was used as a scapegoat that was said to start World War II. What they did was create a mental mindset that was taught amongst the communities that were leading the changing world. They were teaching a justification for hate and oppression, and it made it very simple for the masses to follow. The Europeans who were building the new world believed they were the superior race, and they were given this power because of their adherence to their Christian faith, and the others who they were better than were given to them to rule over because they were evil and they were beneath them. I mean, people still feel this way today, whether they say it or not. They believe that whites are the superior race. I just remember a clip on social media that said the same thing. This girl said the same thing.
Y'all's race or ethnicity?
Caucasian. Caucasian.
I could have guessed. If you guys could be one race for a day, what would you be and why?
We're the superior race. Like, not as in like that.
Oh, that's mad.
We are the That's the most German answer. I'm not going to...
One thing you need to understand is that hate is not just a mental thing. It is very much spiritual, even more than mental. It is not just a learned behavior, but it is spiritual, that is taught through demons and spirits. It may have seemed that the hate that people had against the Negroes was just about skin color. But when you take a step back and really think about it, that thought is really dumb. If hate is spiritual and is taught by demons, what does Satan and his demons care about skin color? Satan doesn't hate skin color. He hates Yahuwah, the Most High, the God of the Bible. He is against everything that Yahuwah loves. And you really need to understand that, because if you really fall for that lie that these people hated us because of our skin color, it can provoke you while not truly understanding what truly is happening. Now, please listen, I'm not saying that these people did not and do not hate you and that skin color was not involved. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that these people were easily manipulated by the devil and demonic spirits to hate you, and they were told it was about our skin color, while the true reason was held from them. They didn't know why they really hated you. They just were told it was skin color and they accepted it. They were just easily used puppets for a satanic lie that was kept from the light. The lie around skin color and racism was something that they created, and it was a great cover-up that is still able to be used to this day.
To this day! To this day!
When this series is done and you actually understand why you were actually hated, it will make a lot more sense than it being about skin color. I mean, these people can think that they're better than us or whatever. I mean, that's them.
And evidently he feels that they will be accepted socially. And I don't feel that they ever will be. But the whole trouble with this integration business is that in the end, it probably will end up with mixing socially. And you will have, well, I think their aim is mixed marriages and becoming equal with the whites.
But the hate that they had, and many still have today, this was not and is not only about skin color. If you fall to their level of thinking, you are just a victim of white supremacy. Understand, any view of racism, black people, white people, any kind of racial division, all of it is a very modern idea. It is not how the world viewed and classified people before this thing was created. Now, that does not change anything, obviously. Knowing this will not change racism today, but it should change many people's understandings of where these thoughts come from and why. If you believe that your race is superior, it's because of the theories of white supremacists starting from the 17th century. Looking at the white race as the ones that are able to get it together and hold jobs and be civilized is an idea of white supremacy. This is not a natural view that has been held since the beginning of time. Or let's flip it, the reverse can be said. If you believe the black man is superior because he's more physically endowed, this is a twisting of white supremacy. You only see skin color because a white supremacist classified people in this way, and the world eventually adopted his thinking. When you think like that, you're a white supremacist, whether you're Negro or Caucasian or whatever you are. When you use skin color as a definition, you are a white supremacist, or you think like one. And then how this grew was formal education, and then we had mind-controlling programs like The Cosby Show. They kept these classification systems going. You see, the powers that be want us to think in this way, and it's all for a purpose of division, without real understanding. This is racism, and that's the condensed history of how it came to be. It's important that you understand that this way of thought is about the same age as the United States. It's not a mindset that has been found in the world for 1,000 years, but a couple hundred years. And it was put in motion and grew over time to take us to the time that we're in right now. Right now, the powers of the world are reaping the benefits of their systems that they planted in long before. They're just now seeing the harvest grow from it. The more that you look at the world in terms of skin color, you are looking at the world through the eyes and mindset of white supremacy. And here's the crazy thing. Even if you don't believe or agree with white supremacy, you can still be a mental victim to it because you subtly hold on to their mindsets, their views, their values, the ways that they look at the world. And the worst part is most of you aren't able to even see it, or you're not even aware of it. I find that very large in the baby boomer generation. They're so pro-black this and pro-black that, but everything they talk about is based on a level of view of white supremacy. They look at the world through the eyes that white supremacy has taught them. You're a victim to it, even though you're against it. You are a victim. So when we say a black person or a white person, this is not a mindset founded on truth. It is a mindset based on traditions of men that have to do with satanic agendas of placing a certain people over another in order to push forward an idea of supremacy. These values and mindsets are now founded, cemented in the hearts and minds of the world population, while the doctrine was never formally taught. We just grew up in the classifications and we passed it down through the generations. And the thing is that the Negro community, we're the biggest losers of this mentality because we look at ourselves in the way our oppressors have told us to view ourselves in. You must understand, before this mentality was created, and way before the transatlantic slave trade, our ancestors never held such a weak view of themselves that they would only classify themselves by their skin color. The other nations of the world, though they use this classification against us, and they may refer to themselves by a skin color, for instance, Americans do call themselves white men or white women as a description. They still do not fully adopt this, though, to their history or their identity. I don't think they teach their children that they are white people, but they tell their children their family comes from this place or that place. Asians definitely don't teach it this way to their families. Even other Africans that come to the United States don't refer to themselves by their skin color. They teach it by their country, and many of them know the tribes that their families descend from in Africa. The Negro is the only segment of the world population who refers to themselves by a skin color. And it happens to be that this classification was built to say that we are inferior and less than everyone else. We classify ourselves as the losers, and then we live through this reality, equating our lives and our successes based upon the race that says that they are superior to us. I said that real fast. I'm going to repeat it. We classify ourselves as the losers, and then we live through this reality, equating our lives and our successes based upon the race that says that they are superior to us. This is what we are doing, and most of us don't recognize that this is what we are doing. Understand, every time you call yourself a black person, you are calling yourself inferior. And I'm not coming at you because, like I said, even with me knowing this, I still mess up and do this too, because the programming is really deep and is really embedded. And because it's so generally accepted, it's very hard to escape it. We just conform to it. But for me personally, I'm doing my best to mentally retreat from this. And I do truly feel if more of us live in the truth, we will be a support system for each other to hold ourselves accountable to not use this classification anymore. When we say black people, if we're going to use it at all, this needs to be referred to the Negroes that are assimilated and mentally controlled by their oppressors, and they like it. Those in the boule, or those in politics, or part of that Black Greek letter organization. I'm talking about those that are conquered, those that accept it, and those that promote it. Let them be black people. We that are awoken to the truth can no longer be black people, nor can we accept for others to classify us in this way. When we grow in strength through this standard, our enemy will have a very hard time dealing with us, which is why these kind of messages are not mainstream. And if it is heard, it usually comes from some type of radical that makes you scared to walk in it because there's some kind of other hate attached to it. I'm not teaching you to hate anything or anyone. I'm just teaching you to not be mentally controlled and used as a tool. What I'm saying is that we are not black people. When we use this term of black people, we are using the classification of our skin color as a tool of white supremacy, and we are admitting that we are victims to it. If you no longer desire to be a victim to it, regardless of your nationality or skin color, do not refer to people by their or your skin color. This is a tradition of men, evil men. We are encouraged in the scriptures to reject profane and old women's fables and exercise ourselves rather unto righteousness. That's 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. We are also told to not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind, that we may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Elohim. As Romans chapter 12, verse 2. You see, people use these scriptures all day long, but it never goes that deep, and it really needs to. Racism is a trained mental thought given to us by the men of this world, by racists who are used by Satan to create a justification for spiritual and physical and mental hate. The foundation of it sets a divide and keeps people blind to the truth of this world, and when you look at the effects of it, this doctrine is unproportionately directed at and affects one segment of the world population more than any other group, and that is the Negro. So be done with it. We are not black people. Say it yourself and believe it. You are not a black person. But in order to understand this deeper and really apply it, it is important to understand how you should actually look at people. Because, listen, the world is divided. You can't get around that. Everyone is not the same. Don't get it twisted. There is division in this world. But in order to really understand it correctly and view the world in the way it should be viewed, it's important to view the world through reality and not the false social construct of race and skin color that keeps us deceived and controlled and conquered. So in the next part, we're going to review how the world viewed each other before the social construct of skin color and race was created. So please, continue on in this series to part 3 and understand this topic even deeper. Remember, right now, many of you are the dry bones. And as Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost and you yourselves are cut off, but I am here to show you the complete opposite is true. Your hope is not lost and you yourselves are not cut off if you just awaken and be who you truly are. So I will show you. Click the link to the next video and let's talk some more. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Again, not according to the color of skin, but according to tribe. Now, the book of Genesis really provides a good basis of understanding of who these people are. When we read Genesis and we see those chapters about the sons of men, we often can just skim over that as useless info. But if we decide to dig deep to gain more understanding, we can really grow in knowledge. That info explains tribes of people, and if you follow the history of those tribes, you can follow the history of the world. This is why I speak of the Bible as the most known history book. We'll start with the Hamites, the descendants of Ham. I start with them because they are the beginning of recorded ancient history. They were the tribes of the great civilizations. Let's track it. Genesis chapter 10. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabteka, and Nimrod. All of these sons were Cushites. They dwelt in this land, northeastern Africa, and the Nile Valley, south of Egypt. They spread along the tracts extending from the higher Nile to the Euphrates and the Tigris River. Of Cush's notable sons, we know of Nimrod, the father god of paganism. Chapter 10 says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. If you look for the definition of Shinar, you will see this is another name for Sumer or Samaria, later known as Babylon after the Tower of Babel. After Cush, the other son of Ham was Mizraim. Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt. The word Mizraim is plural form, meaning upper and lower Egypt. They were the second world empire after Samaria, Babylon. Verse 13 of chapter 10 says, Mizraim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lebahim, Nephtahim, Pathrusim, and Cashlahim, from whom came the Philistines and Caphtorim. So you see, these tribes were where the Philistines came from, a tribe of people who were one time major opponents of the Israelites until they were wiped out. Let's cover another son of Ham, who was Canaan. This is obviously where the land of Canaan came from, and they were driven out of their land by Joshua and the Israelites. The Canaanites are what we know today as the Africans. It is written in the Babylonian Talmud, for when the Africans came to plead against the Jews before Alexander of Macedon, they said, Canaan belongs to us, as it is written, the land of Canaan with the coast thereof. And Canaan was the ancestor of these people, i.e. ourselves. Basically, in 332 BC, when Alexander the Great conquered the land of Israel, the Africans came to Alexander claiming that the land of Canaan belonged to them. Verse 15 says, Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, and the Sunite, the Arvadite, the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Afterward, the families of the Canaanites were dispersed. Sidon was the firstborn of Canaan, and where we get the Sidonians. In many history books, you'll read about the Sidonians under the name of the Phoenicians. The Greeks called the Sidonians Phoenicians. These were the descendants of Ham. Before Greek conquest, they were the power structure of ancient civilization, and they spread out amongst the continent we know as Africa. The Hamites' civilization included the continent of Africa, the land of Canaan, which is Israel, parts of Arabia, Syria, Phoenicia, Turkey, Babylonia, southern Persia, Iran, East Pakistan, and a large part of India. So when we think that Africa is just part of one tribe of people, that is ignorance. There are many tribes of people in Africa in that land. But let's keep going. It's important to note that what people have been taught about the Negroes is that the reason they were taken in slavery is because they were cursed. And this is absolutely true, but the deception is which curse? People are taught that it was the curse of Canaan. Then he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren. And he said, Blessed be Yahuwah, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May Elohim enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. That's Genesis chapter 9, verses 25 through 27. You see, this curse is on all the descendants which are in Africa, which is why their lands have been pillaged and why they have been controlled by other nations. But this is not the same curse that came over the Negroes. But that will be discussed at another time. So, in continuing this discussion of the other nations, let's skip over Shem and go to Japheth, who we know as the Japhites. This is probably the least discussed son of Noah. Genesis chapter 10, verses 2 through 5, goes over the children of Japheth. It says the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Teraz. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Verse 5 says that from these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So Japheth occupied the isles of the Gentiles, which was the shore territories of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and parts of Asia Minor, from where they dispersed northward over the entire continent of Europe and a great part of Asia. Japheth's descendants traveled west, north, and northeast of the mountain of Ararat and the Caucasus Mountains. Let's talk about the sons of Japheth. Again, they were Gomer, Magog, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tetras. Gomer was the ancestor of the first Cimmerians and of the later Cimbri. These people include offshoots of the Celtic family and of the present-day Gaels of Ireland, Scotland, and the Hebrides Islands. Then the second son of Japheth was Magog. The Greeks called these people Scythians. The Scythians included all the wandering tribes who dwelt mostly near the north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They later migrated to Central Asia, Russia, and the Ukraine. The third son of Japheth was Madai, the father of the Medes. They were located at the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and they later united with the Persians to form one race. The fourth son of Japheth was Javan. From him came the Ionians and all the Greeks. We also find Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, Japheth's grandson, and these people form the Germanic race, better known as the Germans. It is also where the Ashkenazi Jews of Europe descend from. Look at the name Ashkenaz. This is a topic that should be understood deeper. In the 4th century AD, the Germanic tribes were on the move. They were known under these names: the Lombards, Burgundians, Franks, Saxons, Angles, Jutes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Suevis, and Vandals. These 10 Germanic barbarian tribes settled all over Western Europe, and they intermingled with modern nations of Western Europe as we know them today, which is where we get Europeans. The children of Japheth are where we get the Europeans from today. Now we know that Europeans are what is classified as white today. So the question may be, were they originally white beginning from Japheth? This answer is difficult to say for sure. Anybody that feels that they can say this one way or another is speaking in absolutes that they should not do. But that's an introduction to the Japhites. Lastly, we will discuss Shem, who we know as the Semites. Chapter 11 of the book of Genesis goes over the sons of Shem until we get to Abram, who later would be named Abraham. Abraham was not only the father of the Hebrew Israelite nation, but also of the Arab nation. Abraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Genesis chapter 16 verse 1 says, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian and maidservant whose name was Hagar. Hagar bore Abraham's first son Ishmael." The Bible doesn't speak of his descendants, but other historians note that he married an Egyptian woman and had 12 sons. These 12 sons became the 12 tribes and inhabited the region from the Euphrates to the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula. And then from Abraham's other son, Isaac, we see his son Jacob, who bore the 12 tribes of Israel. The other son of Isaac was Esau, where we get the Edomites from. Edom meaning red. This was an ancient nation south of Israel and Moab. They were opponents of the Israelites. Herod the Great was an Edomite, but after Yahusha, their history is also a little vague. When discussing the Bible, this information should really assist with understanding who the Gentiles are. In the Bible, the Gentiles are also known as the other nations. When looking at the people in ancient history by their tribes, it really should drive that point home. Now, as we go through world history and begin to understand the Greek and Roman empires and how they intermingled with the other nations, you will be able to understand more how skin colors changed in regions. One thing many people like to say in these videos is that they don't believe Jesus was black, but he was probably a Middle Eastern. What they mean by this is his complexion was of lighter skin and had different features than of a typical black American male. The reason why this view is held is because what we see today of the people in the Middle East is fair-skinned people, at least what they show us on the television. But this is because of the intermingling of the other nations when they were conquered by Greece and Rome. It is important to understand that this was something that the culture of the Hebrews strictly prohibited. Not to say it didn't happen, but they were very protective about who they mated with. This was their culture according to their Torah. Deuteronomy chapter 7 verses 1 through 4 says, "When Yahuwah, your Elohim, brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when Yahuwah your Elohim delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of Yahuwah will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. And that was their culture. It's very clear. Now, when the Greeks Hellenized the world with their Greek culture, there was a lot of intermingling between tribes. So Japhites and Hamites and Semites were often being mixed together. And this is really easily understood when analyzing the Egyptians. The Egyptian Empire was a second world empire, and it's not very hard to understand or know that the people there were darker skinned black people. They were not the Negroes. The thing about black skin is that our melanin literally allows us to absorb the sun, which makes our skin compatible with the climates in the Middle East and Northern Africa. Now, after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and established his major city, Alexandria in Egypt, it's very easy to see how the Greeks cohabited with the Egyptians. This happened in many places all over the conquered world. The point of this part is to give proper background into the history of the tribes of the world. The world was divided by tribes, and there were nations or tribes that conquered the world. We spoke about where the idea of racism came from, and then we discussed the tribes that inhabited the world. Will this end racism? Obviously not. But understanding that racism is an idea created in modern history may help put it into better perspective for all of us. The Bible teaches us many things if we choose to study it. There is no reason to judge anyone by their race and skin color. This was an idea created by white supremacists. I know it's hard to remove the classifications created. We have many stereotypes associated with our racial classifications as well, so this is something that is not going away. But racism is a tool used for division, and it will be used to create civil wars in different places in the world. We are all created by the same Creator, and He has given us all the same chance of redemption and salvation through belief in Yahushua the Messiah. Yahuwah does not look at us by our race, so those that are saved through redemption of the blood of Yahushua must make real efforts to change the way we view others, and that we do not contribute to the racist mentalities that exist. There are many that would not worship Yahushua if they knew he was of darker skin. They love the idea of the white Jesus that has been spread by the Roman Catholic Church. That's not reality. And on the flip side, there are many that refuse to even believe in Yahushua because they all have seen the white Jesus images and they don't want to believe in this European religions. All of these are misunderstandings that come from the lack of information and study, while also being programmed through media and formal education. But there are just things that need to be better understood in order to better understand the true world that we live in, away from all the clutter they've put in our minds. After we now understand racism and how the world was really divided by tribes and nations, we need to understand more about the Israelites and who they are. And so if you understand this teaching, I truly hope that you move away from the thought about skin color when we say black people being Jews, because that is not what this series about understanding Israel is about. It is deeper than skin color. But the thing is that as we go through history and reading from historians, they do speak in reference to skin color, and there will be references made about skin color. But that is not the main objective being taught here. I am not elevating races over another. This teaching is not about black pride and all of that. Now, I do believe that people should know who they are and where they descend from, and this information has been withheld from us intentionally. But if you are understanding this from a thought process surrounding skin color, you're missing the overall point. Please do not bring racism into this. If you believe that the Negroes are not the descendants of Jews that were in the land of Africa and the slave coast during the transatlantic slave trade, then you need to discuss what tribe or nation of people was. Speak in terms of tribes and nations. Speak in terms of how Yah divided the world and has us understand the world through. When you're speaking about skin color, you are speaking in the terms Satan has created. Now, I will admit that it can be hard to do. This reprogramming is not simple. But if you're trying to understand biblical topics, you cannot apply it with race and skin color. When I speak of the people you label as black people being Jews, I'm not saying that all black people are Jews. I mean, that's ridiculous. Again, like I showed, Africa is full of different tribes, as we went over the line of Ham and his descendants. There was a reason why they picked the Negroes to sell them into slavery. It is also very important to not feel disconnected from Yah if you follow your lineage and you recognize that you are not a descendant of Israel by blood. This does not discredit you or make you unable to receive in the promises of Yah. You can be redeemed through the blood of Yahusha, but you must submit to him and believe in him and follow all he has commanded. It's important that you recognize your heritage and break iniquities and generational curses. There is nothing wrong with being a Gentile, and you should not feel threatened by this. You can be redeemed, and you should make it your business of life to be redeemed. Just follow Yah and believe in his Son whom he sent. The importance of who Israel is all about fulfillment of end times prophecy and making sure we are not aligning ourselves with hijackers who have infiltrated the faith in order to bring about a satanic kingdom. It is very important that we live in truth, and that's why teachings like this have been brought forth. Reject the thought about skin color, and as we discuss these topics, do not look at it based on the color of skin, but of the nation that these people represent. You may hear references of skin color, and that is just to help solidify the understanding. But this is not about skin color or race. This is not about the elevation of one race or skin color over another. And I ask that you please review these thoughts and not apply it to these teachings. And don't come in the comments with them. There's no tolerance for it. I believe all can be redeemed through the blood of Messiah, and I reject all that say otherwise. But I am not editing truth to make it easier for you to digest. If you love Yah, love him genuinely, regardless of race or color or these other divisions Satan has created. He loves you and desires that you come to him, and he has given you a way. And understanding the nation he chose and directed will help you follow him better. If you believe in Yah and follow him, then submit to him and align to his truths. Live through him and be a part of his set-apart body. We are here to live in his truths, so we must be bold enough to proclaim it. Stand strong in Yah and rebuke the lies and ways of our enemy. Prepare for Yah's kingdom, because his day is upon us all. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please like it and share it with others. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to my email list on my website, truthunedited.com. Again, I would like to thank all those who support this ministry. I truly am humbled by your support. You are an answer to sincere prayers, and I thank the Father for you. Thanks again for your support. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all. How the world was divided before race was created. The descendants of Japheth. Okay, so you should be coming from part 3 of the series. These videos are a part of a docu-series and should be watched from the beginning in order if you're going to understand what is being presented. So please, if you have not watched parts 1 through 3, please stop this video and start back from video 1 and watch them consecutively for true context. Okay, well, like I said in parts 1 through 3, we are not black people. But again, this statement still needs a lot more information in order for the point to be validated and to be true. In the last part, we went through how the world was divided before race and skin color. In that discussion, we discussed one of the sons of Noah, which was Ham. Let's continue with this discussion and go over another son of Noah. We'll skip over Shem and go to Japheth, who we know as the Japhites. This is probably the least discussed son of Noah, and there is a reason why. Genesis chapter 10, verses 2 through 5 goes over the children of Japheth. It says, the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Repath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Verse 5 of chapter 10 says, from these, the coastland people of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So, Japheth occupied the Isle of the Gentiles, which were the shore territories of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and parts of Asia Minor, from where they dispersed northward over the entire continent of Europe and a great part of Asia. Japheth's descendants traveled west, north, and northeast of the mountain of Ararat and the Caucasus Mountains. The Japhites settled near the mountains Taurus and Amanus in Turkey. They journeyed to the river Tanai in southeast Russia and along Europe to Cadiz, Spain. Let's talk about the sons of Japheth. Again, they were Gomer, Magog, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Again, this is Genesis chapter 10, verse 2. Gomer was the ancestor of the first Cimmerians and of the later Cimbri. These people include offshoots of the Celtic family and of the present-day Gaels of Ireland, Scotland, and the Hebrides Islands. Then, the second son of Japheth was Magog. Flavius Josephus said that the Greeks called these people Scythians. The Scythians included all the wandering tribes who dwelt mostly near the north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They later migrated to Central Asia, Russia, and the Ukraine. The third son of Japheth was Madai, the father of the Medes. They were located at the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and they later united with the Persians to form one people, which we know as the Medo-Persians. The fourth son of Japheth was Javan, better as Yavan, being that the letter J did not exist at their beginning. From him came the Ionians and all the Greeks. We also find Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, Japheth's grandson, who formed the Germanic race, better known as the Germans. In the Hebrew language, the word Ashkenaz literally means Germans. So when anyone claims to be a son of Ashkenaz or to be Ashkenazi, they are claiming to be a son of Japheth. Anyway, Tubal the fifth son of Japheth is associated with Yavan. The scriptures state, "I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Javan, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my fame nor seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles." Isaiah chapter 66, verse 19. You see, Meshech and Tubal are nations of the north. There are Meshech and Tubal and all their multitudes, with all their graves around it, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living. Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 26. What's prophesied for them in the future is not very good. Josephus identified the descendants of Tubal with the early Iberians. Now the last son of Japheth was Tiras, the father or ancestor of the Thracians. This land, Thrace, was situated north of Turkey, Asia Minor, and northeast of Greece. In the 4th century, the Germanic tribes were on the move. They were known under these names: the Lombards, Burgundians, Franks, Saxons, Angles, Jutes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Suevis, and Vandals. These 10 Germanic barbarian tribes settled all over Western Europe, and they intermingled with themselves, creating these modern nations of Western Europe as we know them today, which is where we get Europeans. Understand, the children of Japheth are where we get the Europeans from today. The reason why they don't speak about this history in a great way is because it does not align with their doctrine of white supremacy. White supremacy must be made to feel and be the dominant leaders of the world. And though in our modern history they absolutely can be claimed to be in dominance and power and control, I mean, that's undeniable, they control most of the world today. But when you actually know who they are, and then you actually apply the Bible that they have controlled how we read it and what we know, we can know where this dominance will actually lead them. For instance, the Most High is completely against many of these sons of Japheth. Yahuwah prophesies this: "And the word of Yahuwah came unto me, saying, Son of Adam, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn you back, and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you forth, and all your army, horses, and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields. all of them handling swords, Persia, Cush, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah, the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with you. Be prepared and prepare yourself, you and all your company that are assembled unto you, and be you a guard unto them. After many days you shall be visited. In the latter years you shall come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of my people, against the mountains of Yasharel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. You shall ascend and come like a storm. You shall be like a cloud to cover the land, you and all your bands, and many people with you. Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into your mind, and you shall think an evil thought, and you shall say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil, and to take a prey, to turn your hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land. That's Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 1 through 12. Also it says, Therefore, son of Adam, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you back, and leave but the sixth part of you, and will cause you to come up from the north parts, and will bring you upon the mountains of Yasharel. And I will smite your bow out of your left hand, and will cause your arrows to fall out of your right hand. You shall fall upon the mountains of Yasharel, you and all your bands, and the people that is with you. I will give you unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. You shall fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, says Adonai Yahuwah. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah. That's Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. You see, these are the tribes of the people of Europe, and also Africa, that will come against Yah's chosen people when they dwell securely, but they will be destroyed. This is their history, and because of what is prophesied of them, our knowledge is not given about them. Their doctrines and their ways of this world is what most of us are following. When we're following this world system, we are following the people of Japheth, because they have been used to come against Yah's chosen people during the times of Jacob's trouble, and they are still being used to come against Yah's chosen people in the final last days. The people that are today classified as the white races, they began near the Caucasus Mountains, and from there they spread north, northwest, and northeast into Europe and Asiatic Russia. Now we obviously know today the Japhites, what we call Europeans, or what we call white today. The question is, were they originally white from the beginning from their ancestor Japheth, or did a change materialize in the skin color of the descendants of Japheth? The question, it's difficult to answer, and anyone who speaks with conviction as if they know either way, they're lying. There have been people that have said that Japheth was a black man, but he wanted to be white, so God changed him to be a white man. To me, that is ridiculous, and if it were true, I think our Father would have showed this to us in His Word, so I reject that story unless someone else can prove it to me in the Word. Now, what kind of makes more sense to me, there are scientists and anthropologists who have found different kinds of mutations in certain parts of the world. You see, a physical mutation is a sudden variation or change, the offspring differing from its parents in some outstanding characteristic. For instance, there are blonde-haired people among the darker-skinned Australian Aboriginals, or those with blue eyes. That is not what we have normally seen. This is an example of that mutation. Albinos are also a good example of mutation with their white skin, woolly hair, and thick lips. Don't be offended by the word mutation. Any sudden change from the normal is to be regarded as a mutation. When Japhites separated at the Tower of Babel, the theory is, and what is most probable, is that they turned white. You see, there are many biblical cases of individuals turning white-skinned. Understand, there are a few occasions that the Bible does speak on skin color. Yahuwah the Most High is not concerned with the color of our skin, but how much of our heart is for Him. But let's look at some scriptures that do speak about skin color. First one we will look at is with Moses. Yah wanted to show Moses a miracle, so He turned Moses' hand white. Then he turned it back to its original color. Exodus chapter 4, verses 6 and 7 says, "Furthermore, Yahuwah said to him, 'Now put your hand in your bosom.' And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. And he said, 'Put your hand in the bosom again.' So he put his hand in his bosom again, and drew it out of his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh." Exodus chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. You see, so there was a difference in the color of his skin versus white skin. I mean, this is what a form of leprosy is. The skin turning white. This is what leprosy looks like. Now, I know people will say, no, this is vitiligo. But vitiligo is a modern name for this condition. It was not spoken of like this in the biblical times. And this is why they had conditions in the Torah in regards to whether it's clean or unclean. But let's continue. Who did Moses marry? He married an Ethiopian, a Cushite from the line of Ham. We know there is no argument from people that the skin color of the Hamites, specifically the Ethiopians, that they were dark-skinned, that they call them black. Moses married an Ethiopian woman, and Moses' brother and sister were angry about it, and Yah did the same thing to his sister. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. And then later on in the same chapter, verse 10, it says, "And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was, a leper." Numbers chapter 12, verse 10. Same thing done to Moses was done to his sister. There's also a story in 2 Kings chapter 5 of Elisha's servant being cursed with leprosy and turning white as snow. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master. But by him, Yahuwah had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened, when the king of Israel read the letter, that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I Elohim to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." So it was, when Elisha, the man of Elohim, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please, let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious, and went away, and said, "Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of Yahuwah, his Elohim, and wave his hand over the place, and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Parfa, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. And her servants came near and spoke to him, said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean?" So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of Elohim. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of Elohim, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him. And he said, "Indeed, now I know that there is no Elohim in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant." But he said, "As Yahuwah lives, before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, "Then, if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth. For your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to Yahuwah." Yet in this thing, how the world was divided before race was created. The descendants of Ham. Okay, so you should be coming from part 2 of this series. These videos are a part of a docu-series and should be watched from the beginning in order if you're going to understand what is being presented. So please, if you have not watched part 1 or 2, please stop this video and start back from video 1 and watch them consecutively for true context. Okay, well, like I said in part 1 and 2, we are not black people. But obviously this statement still has not been proven. This statement still needs a lot more information in order for the point to be validated and to be true. In the last part, we went through the history of how classification of race and skin color was created. We learned that no matter how you break it down, when we classify someone according to their skin color, we are a mental victim to white supremacy. But now that we have this understanding, it is important that we dig a little deeper, because once you break out of a mental program, if you don't actually fix it, you will stay in that mental trap because you had nowhere to go with it. So the next progression in this understanding is getting the answer to the next question. The next question being, how did the world classify people before race and skin color was created? And where did these races that were classified come from? This is a more in-depth question that can only be answered through an analysis of history. Before the racist theory, people were identified by their tribal name, the people that they came from. The Greeks, the Arabs, Persians, Babylonians, Philistines, etc. These tribes are what spread out amongst the earth since the beginning of civilization. And certain tribes were more dominant than others and created world empires of their known world during their time. So to have a better understanding of people, we need to go back to world history. Now, my studies start back in the world's best known history book, the Bible. If you believe that men evolved from monkeys, then in the beginning of my explanations, you will begin to disagree until we come to the civilizations that they're indisputable. My only question to those who believe that men come from monkeys, why aren't monkeys changing to humans today? Anyways, we go to the Bible. Now, I know that for many that don't believe in the Bible, you're immediately taken back and may want to stop watching because depending on who you are, you have different reasons for your lack of belief in the Bible. And that's fair. This video is not a discussion about your belief in God, so you can take a step back from that for now. If you do want to discuss him though, I have many different videos that do discuss him, but that's not where we are at the series right now. We will get there, but just not this point yet. I don't think that most people know or understand that above many things, the Bible is a huge history book. If you read it outside of the indoctrinated way that mainstream religion teaches us to read it through, you can learn a great deal about history. So if maybe you change your thinking about what the Bible is, it may help you understand it. Let me tell you what the Bible is. In a nutshell, the Bible is a history book about the Israelites. It tells their history, but also contains prophecy about their future. Right now, I will not be focusing on their future or their prophecy, but we will go back and use the Bible to understand history. And not just the history of the Israelites, but the other nations of the world. But who are the Israelites in the Bible? This was an ancient tribal people in the world, just like the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Babylonians were. But in the Bible, which is their history book, they provide good background on the history of the world and the other nations. It gives a starting point that will help you understand the history of civilizations. Now let me be clear, the Bible is not my only source that I will be using. It does give a foundation, but after that, you do need to pull more research to understand these other civilizations outside of the Israelites. Now, I do pull information from many different places, but I think if you want to start a general study, a good place to start is a book by Rudolf Windsor called From Babylon to Timbuktu. His book is an excellent primer on history of civilization. Now, I do not agree with everything he says, as this is the case mostly for most books that I read. But aside from some of his personal opinions, he is an excellent researcher, and as any research is done, he cites many sources that you should read as well that will help you in your overall understanding. So let's get into it though. When I discuss history, I like to start post-flood with Noah, because much of the world before that time is just not recorded. Now don't just run because I said Noah. Give me a minute or two to just hear me out, please. Noah had 3 sons. They were Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And from these 3 sons, the world was populated. They had wives too, okay? Many people ask me that. If we were to really classify people today, it would be proper to classify people according to this. There are Shemites, Hamites, and Japhites. Again, remember, we are not classifying people according to the color of their skin, but according to the tribe of which people descend from. Now, the book of Genesis provides a good basis of understanding of who these people are. When we read Genesis and they speak about the sons of men and their descendants, we often could just skim over that as useless information. But if we actually decide to dig deeper to gain understanding, we can really grow. That info in Genesis explains tribes of people, and if you follow that history of those tribes, you can follow the history of the world. And this is why I speak of the Bible as the most known history book. I mean, you could debate about Noah and say, did it happen? I mean, I personally absolutely believe it did. But when you keep reading after Noah, when it starts talking about the different tribal names, you can't debate that these people existed. And this is what I'm going to be speaking on. Now, here's the challenge, and I want to make this known now. We do not have our own maps. We are dealing with the maps of our oppressors. The same people who oppressed us and took us as slaves are those same ones who made our maps. So much of the territories I could be speaking of could be based upon what they have shown us and not actually be the original biblical areas. There are many more knowledgeable in this than me that can speak to the true areas on our map. So please bear with me in that regard. What I'm trying to explain here is not the authenticity of our maps, but the way that the world was divided long before race and the color of our skin was ever used. If I'm adding to the indoctrination because I'm using their maps, I don't mean to. It's just the only way I can teach right now.
Save 50% on iPhone 16 Pro and all other iPhone 16 models at Cox Mobile.
Okay, let's start with the Hamites, the descendants of Ham. I start with them because in the beginning of recorded ancient history, they were the tribes of the great civilizations. Let's track it. Genesis chapter 10. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabteka, and Nimrod. All these sons were Cushites. They dwelt in this land of northeastern Africa in the Nile Valley, south of Egypt. They spread along the tracts extending from the higher Nile to the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. From Cush is who we know as Ethiopia. So this area would be known as Cush or Ethiopia. But please understand that Ethiopia was not as small as the nation it represents today. Now, of Cush's notable sons, we know of Nimrod, the father god of paganism. Chapter 10 says the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. If you look for the definition of Shinar, you will see this as another name for Sumer or Sumeria, later known as Babylon after the Tower of Babel. After Cush, the other son of Ham was Mizraim. Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt. The word Mizraim is plural form, meaning upper and lower Egypt. They were the second world empire after Sumeria/Babylon. Verse 13 of Genesis chapter 10 says, Mizraim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehibim, Naphtuhim, Pathrusim, and Kashluhim, and from whom came the Philistines and Caphtorim. So you see, from these tribes is where the Philistines came from, a tribe of people who were one time major opponents of the Israelites. Let's cover another son of Ham, who was Canaan. This is who the land of Canaan obviously came from, and they were driven out of this land by Joshua and the Israelites. The Canaanites are what we know today as Africans. Verse 15 says, Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Archite, and the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. Afterward, the families of the Canaanites were dispersed. So understand, what I just went through, the Hamite civilization included the continent of Africa. That's what I'm trying to explain. The book of Jubilees says, And Ham divided against his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush towards the east, and to the west of him for Mizraim, and to the west of him for Put, and to the west of him, and to the west thereof of the sea for Canaan. That's Jubilees chapter 9, verse 1. Now, many Hamites did migrate towards the east and the south. This was the tribe of Canaan, and the land was later known as the land of Canaan. They migrated into Shem's land and occupied it. This happened after the Tower of Babel. Scripture says, "In the 4th week, in the 1st year, in the beginning thereof, in the 4th and 30th Jubilee, where they dispersed from the land of Shinar, and Ham and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy. And he acquired as his portion in the land of the south. And Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Mizraim, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that is to the sea, and he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward, from the border of the Jordan, and from the border of the east. And Ham his father, and Cush Mizraim, his brothers, said unto him, You have settled in a land which is not yours, and which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do so, you and your sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. For by sedition ye have settled, and by sedition will your children fall, and you shall be rooted out forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for to Shem and to his sons did it come by their lot. Cursed are you, and cursed shall you be beyond all the sons of Noah, by the curse by which we bound ourselves by an oath in the presence of the holy judge, and in the presence of Noah our father. But he did not hearken unto them, and dwelt in the land of Lebanon from Hamath to entering of Mizraim, he and his sons until this day. And for this reason, that land is named Canaan." That's Jubilees chapter 10, verses 27 through 34. It just gives an explanation of how they took the land before the Israelites took it over. Canaan took Shem's land, and this is why in the scriptures it was called the land of Canaan. There were 11 Canaanite tribes living in the land of Canaan and surrounding it before the Israelites took back their inheritance. Okay, we got that. So let's talk about the Canaanites some more. One of the greatest cultural and commercial cities of these Canaanites were Tyre and Sidon. The Sidonians and Tyrians were from the same people. The city Sidon, or Zidon, gets its name from the firstborn son of Canaan. Sidon was the firstborn of Canaan, and it's where we get the Sidonians. But because of cultural conquests, in many history books, you'll read about the Sidonians under a different name, the name of the Phoenicians. You see, the Greeks called the Sidonians Phoenicians, land of palm, because they found many palm trees there. And because they're the conquerors, it's their name that we know them by. But the Sidonians called their nation by their name of Canaan, the first son of Canaan. You see, due to white supremacy, at some point, they whitewashed history and they confused everything. If we were to look at everything from their racial perspective, then you would see that these civilizations that I'm talking about were by people that system will classify as black people. But if you just do a Google search about the Phoenicians and look at images, many images tell a different story. You see, they whitewashed and confused history. But the point I'm trying to display is that even though they were what we would be considering black people to be, they were still not related to the Israelites who later came back and took back their land of inheritance in Canaan. They might be black because they were dark-skinned, but they were not kin to everyone. That's what I'm saying. So in understanding these Canaanites, there were 11 Canaanite tribes. They were the Sidonians, the Hittites, the Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and the Hamathites. This is according to Genesis chapter 10, verses 15 through 18. And Israel fought a lot of battles with these people. And let's also be clear that the Phoenicians are Sidonians, and they were Canaanites, of what we refer to today as Africans. The Phoenician language of the Canaanite can be classified as an African language because the Canaanites were blood brothers of the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, aka Cushites, Nubians, Sudanese, and other Africans. This is based upon Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. There's a lot with the Phoenicians. They established a colony in North Africa called Carthage, and they were known as the Carthaginians, and they always considered themselves Canaanites. It is written in the Babylonian Talmud, you know, that book that the modern day Jewish people who are truly from Japheth, it's written from their book. For when Africans came to plead against the Jews before Alexander of Macedon, they said, Canaan belongs to us. As it is written, the land of Canaan with the coast thereof. And Canaan was the ancestor of these people, i.e. ourselves. Basically, what I'm saying is that in 332 BC, when Alexander the Great conquered Palestine, the Africans came to Alexander claiming the land of Canaan belonged to them. That's what this is saying. Now here's a very interesting point. If you understand language, the Phoenician Canaanite language is very similar to Hebrew. As this source from the World History Encyclopedia says, in reference to the Phoenician alphabet and language, they say Phoenician is a Canaanite language closely related to Hebrew. Very little is known about the Canaanite language, except what could be gathered from the El Armana letters written by the Canaanite king to Pharaoh Amenhotep and Akhenaten. He says the Canaanite language is related to Hebrew. Also, according to Smith's Bible Dictionary, under the term Canaanite, he writes, applies as a general name to the non-Israelite inhabitants of the land, as we have already seen with the case with Canaan. Instances of this are Genesis chapter 12, verse 6, Numbers chapter 21, verse 3. The Canaanites were descendants of Canaan. Their language was very similar to Hebrew. Yeah. You see, we understand this to be true because when Abraham came from the region of Babylon into the land of Canaan, we find this move in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. He communicated very well with the inhabitants of this land of Canaan that he was in. He adopted it and made certain modifications, and it became known as Ivri, or what we know as Hebrew. That's the language. Consequently, we can say that the Hebrew Canaanite language is one of African languages. What I'm saying is that Hebrew is not tied to European dialect. That's all I'm explaining here. But the interesting point that I'm getting at is that the English alphabet is derived from two ancient, what we would call African languages: the Phoenician Canaanite alphabet and the Hebrew alphabet. This is according to Herbert Went in his book, It Began in Babel. This is on page 94. The Phoenicians had a very powerful navy. They were a great trading people. When the Phoenicians traded with the Greeks did not have an alphabet. As a result, they adopted the Phoenician alphabet in order to transact business. The Greeks passed this alphabet to the Romans, and the Romans transmitted it to the German Anglo-Saxon tribes. Then it was brought to the British Isles. Now let me show you. The first two letters of the Phoenician and Hebrew alphabet are Aleph and Bet, which is where you get the word alphabet from. You see? What I'm explaining to you is the influence of African culture in our modern world that the majority have no knowledge of because history was whitewashed. White supremacy changed the color of any society that had any influence in order to promote their dominance. And we see that it worked. I mean, look at this book from Captivating History discussing the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were Canaanites who were Africans. They did not look like this. And if you think that they only did this with this inconsequential nation that we really only know from our alphabet, then you don't really understand how they programmed our idea of the world. But the point that I'm getting at is about the descendants of Ham. All these were the descendants of Ham. This is in Africa. Before Greek conquest, they were the power structure of ancient civilization, and they spread out amongst the continent we know as Africa. The children of Ham. Now, as we continue on in these series, we will go on to the next son of Noah and understand the world based upon him and his descendants. The next part of this series, we'll move on to Japheth and his descendants. The point is that as you continue to move through this information, you can better understand how this world was divided, and it was not divided by skin color, but by tribes of people. And as you recognize this fact that classifying ourselves by skin color is extremely ignorant, then you can better understand that we are not black people. So please, continue on the series to part 4 and understand this topic even deeper. Remember, right now, many of you are the dry bones. And as Ezekiel chapter 37 verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost and you yourselves are cut off. But I am here to show you the complete opposite is true. Your hope is not lost and you yourselves are not cut off if you just awaken and be who you truly are. So I will show you. Click the link to the next video and let's talk some more. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to Yahuwah. Yet in this thing, may Yahuwah pardon your servant. When my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leads on my hand, and I bow in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may Yahuwah please pardon your servant in this thing. Then he said to him, Go in peace. So he departed from him a short distance. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of Elohim, said, Look, my master has spared Naaman this Syrian, while not receiving from his hands what he brought. But as Yahuwah lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. So Naaman said, Please, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants. And they carried them on ahead of him. When he came to the citadel, he took them from their hand and stored them away in the house. Then he let the men go, and they departed. Now he went in and stood before his master. Elisha said to him, Where did you go, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant did not go anywhere. Then he said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence, leprous, as white as snow. That's 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 27. You see, this curse that Elisha put on Gehazi, this type of leprosy, it affected the reproductive organs in his body. This meant that all his children would produce white offsprings, even though his skin was darker before. So from this, we do know that this can happen. And so while we don't know the origin of the white skin, and I'm not saying it is a curse, obviously, but just that people can change and it can be passed down through descendants, I'm just providing biblical evidence for my claim. So for the question of how did Japheth become white, the answer is I don't have one, nor does anybody, but there is biblical proof that it can happen, and that's all we really need to know. But the classification of skin, it does not matter. That's what I keep trying to say anyway. Please understand that ancient people did not classify races according to skin color, like the modern nations of Europe and America do today. The ancients, including the Greeks and Romans, identified people according to their national or tribal names. They used such names as Visigoths, Vandals, Saxons, Ethiopians, Carthaginians, Yahudim, Arabs, Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians. They did not use the term Negro or Caucasian, which again, these are modern terms. And they definitely did not use the classification of white people and black people. As I said in part 2 of this series, dividing the world along a color line was an idea that originated with the white supremacists in Europe after the Renaissance. And so, as people today, we are extremely dumbed down. We speak in terms and ways that our oppressors have taught us. And even the Europeans, who are not in control, but are just as controlled, they just don't know it, they are just as mind-controlled as us. But because they have been programmed to see themselves in a position of power, they don't recognize how used and manipulated they have been. The whole world is manipulated. It's not just the Negroes. The whole world is manipulated and conditioned to see through modern eyes that lack an understanding of history. And the goal of it is to lead everyone to hell. Think about how, after all this information of just going over 2 out of the 3 sons of Noah, all this information about how the world was divided and who we all descend from, please think about how ignorant it is to just identify someone by their skin color. It is as ignorant as defining someone by their nose. Imagine us saying pointy nose or flat nose. I mean, do you know how dumb that sounds? That's how dumb it sounds when we refer to each other by black people or white people. But again, please know that with this information, those Europeans who are classified as white people, they can still take this information and go back and review from which son of Japheth they descend from, because their knowledge of self was never removed. It was just hidden by some ancestors. For those of us who they just want us to consider ourselves as black or Afro, whatever, We still don't know who we are, even with this knowledge, because our history was stolen from us. But education and research can change all of that. And I am not talking about that fake education everyone has that makes them feel smart while they're dumb as a brick. I don't care about your stupid degrees from your oppressors. I'm talking about self-education that is done independently away from the mainstream. Everything that you're taught in these institutions is created to keep you dumb and unaware and without knowledge of self. It's all intentional. When we go back and relearn, we become a problem for the system, which is why they don't want us doing it. A scene from one of my favorite shows when I was a child, it shows this. In a different world where Dwayne Wade said this.
Who are you? That's just it, he's nobody. No, I am an educated black man, your worst nightmare, punk.
I mean, we all know that scene. Now, with what I know now, that black man part still bothers me, but we all know what he means. When we are educated in the truth of this world, their lies have little effect upon us. Unfortunately, we took that line saying that if we go to college and become educated, then we become their worst nightmare, but that's another part of the whole mind control lie. If you apply it in that way, you're just a part of the system and you're controlled. That was part of my problem early on when I went to these schools and tried to get these fake degrees. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is bring you back into power away from your enemy. And in order to do that, it requires humility on your part to recognize this hard to hear truth. The truth that you need to hear and say to yourself is that I am a victim of white supremacy that has been indoctrinated into me before I even took my first breath. My parents, my grandparents, and their parents were all victims, and it was passed down to me. I know what my oppressors have taught me. I was brought up in their schools and have dedicated my life to being successful in their system. My life has been dedicated to white supremacy, and in order to liberate myself, I need to wake up and stop being controlled and being a tool. You know, it's hard to admit that we are being controlled and that we're a tool, but that's why I say it takes humility. When you actually really understand what they were doing, it allows you to take steps back and actually fix the problem. Now also, for those on the outside of this, you may get triggered when you hear me say white supremacy. I get it, because you yourselves, maybe you're not like this. Let me say that everything that I just repeated is not just for people that look like me, but it goes for you as well. You are under white supremacy too. You might only hear it in a dividing way because you see skin color. It is so much deeper than that, as I'm trying to say. This is unedited truth that needs to be heard, but I do know it's hard to hear. So it's easier to speak against me instead of recognizing all the evidence I've shown and all the truth in this world that points to it. I'm just trying to help you look at things in a different way, from a different vantage point. This is the history of the world, and the Bible is a great source for history that pretty much gets overlooked. But as you can see from these last two videos, if you just do the slightest amount of research about these descendants, the history from the Bible is proven true, and it can provide great understanding about our world. So in part 3, we went over the sons of Ham. In this part, we went over the sons of Japheth. In the next part, we will move on to the sons of Shem, and this will give us a strong understanding of the division of this world. For many of you watching, you are the dry bones, and it's time that you are awakened. And this series is going to do just that. So now that you understand more about one of the main classifications in this world through understanding the descendants of Ham and Japheth, please continue on to the next part, and please allow me to explain more to you about the next classification group, which is Shem. I hope this has got you thinking. Right now, like I said, many of you are the dry bones. And as Ezekiel chapter 37 verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost, and you yourselves are cut off. But I am here to show you the complete opposite is true, that your hope is not lost, and you yourselves are not cut off, if you just awaken and be who you truly are. So I will show you. Click the link to the next video, and let's talk some more. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, that they knew who they were taking when they were gathering my people as slaves. It was not random. They had a map of boundaries, and they were collecting people from Negro land. Now, if you know history, this area actually is not Negro land, but it was a specific group of people. And like I said, I will get to that later in the series. My point is that they knew who they were taking. So listen, if the slavers knew who they were taking, why don't we know? And why was it so important for them to wipe out our history and knowledge of ourselves? You know, people who love to play devil's advocate and say that we should get over slavery or other people were slaves too. Many people love saying that Irish were slaves too. So it's not just something specific to your people. Those that love saying things like this love to forget the fact that it was not just slavery and forced labor, but it was also a conscious effort to remove our heritage from us over the generations. This is why they separated the children from the parents and forced them to learn a new language, to change their names, to remove their culture. We all know the famous scene from Roots with Kunta Kinte forced to accept his new name, Toby.
I want to hear you say your name. Your name is Toby. What's your name?
Kunta.
Say it! Toby! Who are you? Say your name. What's your name?
Toby.
Hi. Say it again. Say it louder so they all can hear you. What's your name?
Toby.
The question you need to ask yourself is, why? Why was it so important not only for them to use us for forced labor, but why was it just as important for them to strip us from our identity and our heritage? I promise you, there are reasons for this, and if you follow me through this series, these questions will be answered. The point I'm making is that we are not Black people. We are not just merely Africans. We have a specific history and are specific tribe of people. We have been mentally conditioned and programmed to believe that we have no history and we have no purpose. We have no religion either. We have nothing and we are nothing. That's what they want us to believe, that we are property that has been given freedom, and if we want a future, we must participate in the system those who enslaved our ancestors and oppressed our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, etc. If we want a future, we must serve and participate in that system and be grateful that we are granted that opportunity to do so. That's what we're told and conditioned to accept. And for me, this person that you're listening to right now, I reject all that garbage, and I know that's a bunch of garbage and lie from the pit of hell. And as long as I subject myself to that thinking and mindset, I will always be a slave with no power, just with invisible chains instead of the physical yokes of iron my ancestors once had. If you follow that lie, you will always be a slave, and you are getting to the point of no return with it too. My goal is to teach you who you are and how you got here. And listen, if you do not descend from this heritage and you're watching, my goal is to teach you why you should care as well and why it should matter to you too. This is a message all must understand. There is only power in the truth, and it is the truth that sets you free. The scriptures say, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." That's found in John chapter 8, verse 32. You know, many people say this, but they do not know how true this actually is. The truth that you are going to have to deal with is that your enemy has kept the truth from you in order to oppress you and take away your power. For a metaphor, let's use the story of Samson. When thinking about Samson, do you know how the source of Samson's power was his hair, his locks? Once the Philistines knew what the source of his power was, they cut his hair, and then he was able to be overpowered. In the end, the Philistines lost against Samson because they eventually let his hair grow back. Our plight is very much similar, but our power comes through our heritage and living in its full truth. But get this, the enemy knows this, and using our heritage in the same metaphor as Samson's hair, they cut off our heritage, but learned from the mistake of letting our hair grow back. They never allowed us to collectively come back into the knowledge of who we are, and therefore, we have been easy pickings, able to be controlled and conquered, and this is our plight. What I desire to do is help you regrow your hair. You are the dry bones, and it's time that you are awakened. And this series is going to do just that, and it's going to be thorough. So now that you understand the point of this series, please continue on to the next part and allow me to explain to you more about how we got here. I hope this got you thinking. Right now, many of you are the dry bones. And as Ezekiel chapter 37 verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost and you yourselves are cut off. But I am here to show you the complete opposite is true. Your hope is not lost and you are not cut off if you just awaken and be who you truly are. Let me show you. Click the link to the next video and we'll talk some more. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please like this and share this video with family and your friends.
We ought to praise God. Let's count our blessings. I'll teach you a lesson, and yeah, we're gonna praise God. Yeah. We ought to praise God. Let's count our blessings. I'll teach you a lesson, and yeah, we're gonna praise God. We ought to praise God. Let's count our blessings. Let's count our lesson, and yeah, we're gonna praise God.